The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Some of you will remember that there are call stories in most of the prophets. And the call story for the prophet Isaiah is found in chapter 6. And it's this wonderful story about his vision of God sitting on his throne and the angels flying around him with 6 wings, and with one they covered their feet, and with one they covered their face, and with another set they flew. And the house is filled with smoke. It's a grand and glorious vision. It's incredible. And he says, Lord, I am a sinner, and I come from a sinning people. And an angel takes a live coal from the altar and comes and touches his tongue with it. That gotta hurt. And he is proclaiming the word of the Lord. Well, our reading from Isaiah today is the call story for what we call second Isaiah, a prophet in the exile in Babylon. We don't have a name for this person, and he's always just been identified as Isaiah, but it's 100 years later. It's not the same Isaiah. And his call starts with the command by the Lord to comfort the people who are in exile. The people who were born in exile have been raised there, just as we heard last week. And he says to speak tenderly to these people, to Jerusalem, and cry that their term has been served and their penalty is paid, and a proclamation that the exile is soon to end. Soon to end. Good news indeed for these people. And that God has paid their debt, that they have been released from prison. They are being released from prison, that there is no debt left, and they will be restored. And it says that the voice says that the way of the Lord needs to be prepared. It's in the wilderness. We understand the wilderness. We've been there for about 9 months now. The wilderness is not a great place to live. We want out. I know they wanted out. And it's not a smooth walk home from Babylon to Jerusalem. There will be rough places. There will be valleys. There will be mountains. All of this needs to be made level so that the people can live into their destiny to restore Jerusalem, to restore Judah to its health. And then a voice says, cry out, which actually means preach. And the prophet says, what shall I cry? All people are grass. They're not the least bit constant. They're like flowers of the field. They wither, they die, they fade, they go away. Why should I cry out to these people? They're just going to die. And God says to this prophet, get you up to a high mountain. Lift your voice with strength and proclaim, here is your God. They're still in exile. They're looking around. They're not seeing God much at all. But the prophet says, God is right there in the midst of you, right there in front of you, behind you, beside you, all around you. There is your God. And this is a God with a mighty arm and great strength. And that same God whom we picture as a mighty warrior sometimes is also the one who will bend down and gather up the lambs and hold them close to his chest, who will fight for them and will care for them both. And he will lead the mother sheep. What a beautiful image that is for us. It's why I think we read Psalm 23 as often as we do, and one that probably all of us have in some way memorized, if not exactly, certainly around there. Because those images of God being by our side, even when times are hard, as well as when times are good, taking care of us, feeding us, making sure that we can walk through the valley of the shadow of death without fearing the evil, living in the land of exile, in the land of the wilderness, knowing that God is present with us, even though it doesn't feel like anybody is present with us at this time. Here is your God. And what are we supposed to do about that? Well, we're not supposed to sit on our hands and wait. We're supposed to preach. We're supposed to proclaim. We're supposed to cry out that God is with us, that God has not abandoned us. God will not abandon us. God gathers us close and God keeps us near, even though we don't always notice. It is God we turn to in these times. It is God we count on in these times. It is God we cling to in these times, because God is our heart. God is the one who will hold us up and keep us going. God is the one that tells us how we should behave and what we should do. The opening words of this reading, "Comfort, O comfort ye my people," is the same words that is used to open Handel's Messiah, a piece that most everybody is familiar with, and it goes well all the way through into the book of Revelation if you've listened to all three parts. And frequently we sing it at this time of year, but it was originally performed in May, not Easter, not Christmas, just May. The interesting thing is that it was performed in Dublin, not in England where it was written, but in Dublin, where the people were in mighty trouble. The perils of the Irish people were heavy on the hearts of many, although perhaps not on the hearts of those who would have paid money to hear the Messiah. But the people of Ireland needed to hear, "Comfort, oh comfort ye my people," just as we do, just as so many others in this world do right now. And who is to tell them that? Who is to proclaim that message? It is us, my friends. We are the ones who are to proclaim that the Lord is still calling us out to preach, to proclaim, to cry out the good news that we hear at the beginning of the book of Mark. Mark, who doesn't start like everybody else does with birth stories or family trees, which both Matthew and Luke do, or the bizarre poetry that John does. But Mark, who starts immediately with the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. Right away, he's saying, it's the beginning. This is the start. You got to hear this. You got to hear this. He is proclaiming, my brothers and sisters, he is preaching. And the interesting thing is that when you read the Gospel of Mark, it's all the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, right up to the crucifixion. It's still the beginning. And it's the beginning because we live in that beginning. We are still beginning the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the one who came out of the wilderness just as John the Baptist did and proclaimed good news, who actually was the good news. It is that same Jesus Christ that we proclaim, that we cry out in the wilderness about today. It is that same message that we cry to all who will hear it, and to some who won't. And we cry it out whenever possible. We don't beat people up with it, of course, but we do make it clear that that message is the driving force in our lives. That voice that cried out in the wilderness in Isaiah is the one who cried out in the wilderness in Mark, is the one who cries out in all of our days. Yes, we are like grass. We are like the flower. Our glory fades, the blooms fall off, the plants die, but the word continues, as does the love of God, which never, ever lets us go.